This is Trash Panda Publishing. Thank you for joining our podcast, where raccoons talk about books and publishing, and of course, anything related to raccoons. I'm David James, your host. Thank you for joining us for episode number 8. Today is January 6th. It's 11 p.m. I have had a pretty bad day, to be honest, and those of you who are in the Facebook group know why. I told myself I was not going to talk about this on the podcast, but I'm going to anyways. Not to make myself feel worse, because that's not the point of it, but it's more to say, I guess from a healing perspective, talking about it out loud is perhaps a healing mechanism. Coping mechanism is not the right word. It just helps. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. And those of you who have been showering me with encouragement, I really appreciate it. So, Christina, Erica, Lulu, Maddie, Michelle, Maureen, others, John, thank you so much for trying to prop me up. And it worked because I feel a ton better. In fact, Christina was sending me some of my favorite books. She put through the AI detector and she goes, "Look at these books. They've failed too." I don't know why that makes me laugh. I guess the point is that an AI detector can detect anything, and I shouldn't feel bad. So what am I talking about? I was accused on Goodreads today by a reviewer whose profile's private that let me get the quote here. It's like a one-line review, and it says, I should have had this pulled up because now I have this big long gap here in my podcast. It says, "The sample of this book, not to mention the cover, reeks of AI slop." That is the description. And then it's got all these, I guess, hashtags, AI generated, comes from the AI slop machine. Oh, that's funny. Haha. It's not true, first of all. I did not write the book with AI. The story definitely is not AI. If you read the book and you read the note from the author, this character is a character that I created to play role-playing games with. Now, the book itself is not a particular adventure from the role-playing game. It is an amalgamation of her backstory that I concocted when I created her 6 years ago. And the backstory, when I wrote it, was chapter 3, and I think 17 or 18, depending what numbering it is. It's her, well, I'll just leave it at that, because I do describe that in the book. That is what I started with. And if you've ever played a role-playing game, most people who are serious role players have a backstory. They write some little paragraph. For me, it's usually 10 pages or more about who the heck the character is. Why are they adventuring? If you think about it, if you're an adventurer, most people, even today, we live normal lives. We don't go out and risk our lives every day fighting monsters, to the extent there are monsters in this world. But certainly back then, or, in these made-up times, you would not do that. The chances of winning against a monster are pretty slim. You only do it because there's a risk, or there's a chance of a high reward, a box of treasure or a cave full of gold. So it takes a special kind of person to do that. And that kind of special kind of person requires a backstory. It wouldn't just be the average farmer that does this. So you write a backstory, and that becomes your character. It's no different than watching any fantasy movie like Conan or, movies like that. Conan had a backstory. Xena the Princess Warrior had a backstory. That's no different. And Escala started the same way. Now, what happened over time is when you role play, if you play with people who are really good, they ask you questions in character. And I'm not going to explain the whole thing here, but basically the idea is, over many years of playing her, I answered questions in character that started to flesh out the Court of Dreams, her parents, which when I first thought of her, I didn't even think about these things. She was basically kicked out of Feyworld. That's what I started with. But over time, I started to put together, I'm like, man, this has got a really intriguing idea. And Game of Thrones, I'd finished all those books, and Mean Girls, I rewatched that movie and I'm like, wait a minute, if I kind of put these two things together, I have something here. So there's no way to be accused of having AI. I think of the story is insulting. It just insults me. I was so angry. And then the idea that AI would write the book for me, anyone who's read AI writing, you can tell it I'm 100 miles away. It is so over the top. It is written, it's like a combination of poetry and like a drunk bard. It's not interesting and it's so obvious. My book is not like that. Now, one criticism people say is that AI has a tendency to use dashes. I use dashes, and I don't use them in every paragraph, but I use dashes. And evidently, if you use dashes, you will get flagged as that must have been AI. So, and I'm going to get to this in a second. But how long did it take me to write this book? Well, I started in October of 2024. I started outlining. It took me about 2 months to outline the book. I had a 100-page outline, 100 pages of an outline. Because at the time the book was 100 chapters. I had basically 1 page per chapter. It took me 2 months to do that. In January of 2025, I took each chapter and I started, turning it into each page of the outline, I started turning into chapters. It took me all the way through. I was at the beach with my family I think it was the first week of August, and I finished. They will recall that I sat at the pool. Well, we didn't have a pool. I was more like this goldfish thing out in the backyard. We were at Cape Cod, and I finished the first draft, the first complete draft of the whole book. I even read some of it to them out there. And then from basically August all the way through Thanksgiving, however many months that is, 2.5 months, I edited by myself for a while, and then I hired a professional editor who works for Simon & Schuster named Lucy York. And I'm not being published by Simon & Schuster. She just moonlights on the side. And I got her through Reedsy. She did 3 rounds of editing with me, and we published on December 13. That took, I calculated it, about 1,500 man hours for me. 80 drafts. How do I know that? Because each draft is saved with a number. I save each draft incrementally with a number, and it's all saved on Dropbox. And I do that in case you ever want to go back. By the way, one of those drafts, before Lucy got a hold of it, it was 185,000 words. My book is 144,000 words, I believe, or 143,000 words. That does include like the note to the author and all that stuff. She cut 40,000 plus words out of the book. That means, that's a number of chapters, by the way. Someday I'm going to release like the secret edition that has all the chapters that were cut. So why do I share all that? Because to be accused of writing or using AI infuriates me. Okay, what about the cover? Did I use AI for the cover? No. Well, I didn't even do the cover. I knew that people get trolled online for using AI covers. And I went and Googled and looked for a reputable design firm that had done covers for many, many, many published authors in my genre. And I found one called a GNS Cover Design Studio. It's Gene Moloko. And he's an award-winning studio, and he's done dozens, if not 100 publications, some of them bestsellers. And I've listed in my Goodreads response to this guy the names of the people he's done. He has a website. You can go look at it. I hired him because I did not want to be accused of using AI. In fact, the woman on the cover is an actual model. And now, is the background AI? Well, I actually asked him that today. He said no. The background is an amalgamation of stock photos, which you can get off of like Adobe, or there's no shortage of stock Photoshop pictures. They took it all into Photoshop and they glued it together. If you're a Photoshop expert, you kind of sort of merge things together and then you paint over it. So of course there is no crossing picture. You can't go out and take a picture of that. That is created with vector graphics in Adobe. Is that AI? No, but it's computer generated. So Anyways, if you take my cover, there are AI detectors. I uploaded my cover, and of course it says it's AI generated, but I did not do it. And I specifically hired a firm so I would not be accused of this. Now, is the guy lying to me? I certainly hope not. But to be criticized of that when I specifically was trying to avoid that, it just makes me so bad. So I wrote a response to him. I'm not going to read it. You can go read it on Goodreads if you want. Basically, everything I just said to you, I wrote to him. He replied back as a response going, dude, no. That's his response. And then magically, I don't know, 3 hours later, I get another 1-star review, which is probably another account he created, probably to warn me, you keep messing with me, I'm going to create fake accounts and just keep tagging you with 1-star reviews. So, of course, I'm not going to respond anymore because I don't want to have a million 1-star reviews. I have reported these to Goodreads because they're not constructive. I believe they're violations of the terms of the Goodreads website. How in the world is that informative to a reader? There's no evidence that he provides of AI use. It doesn't talk about the story. The second one doesn't even provide any comments. He just provides 1 star. And if you look at it, he filed the book in a folder called AI Slop, which I would argue is defamatory. And in the world of torts, that would be considered libel. Slander is when you tell a mistruth about someone verbally. That's slander. But when you write it, it's libel. And so I basically reported that as libel. They hasn't provided no evidence, and I have denied it. That review should be taken down, and the one that does not have any commentary should be removed immediately because it is completely inflammatory. Now, I've been told that Goodreads doesn't care, and they're not going to take anything down. That's their policy is basically, it's the Wild West. Good luck, sucker. So I'm not holding out any hope here. But anyways, that's why I'm in a pretty poor mood. But I'm in a group called Fellowship of Human Authors, and I have to say they fellowshipped me to death today. I felt so bad. Oh, and also my Amazon sort of blurb, that little paragraph that describes your book, that we ran that through an AI detector, and that failed. Why? And that pisses me off because I use Grammarly to sort of polish that up, and Grammarly told me it was fine because Grammarly has an AI checker as well. And nope, but if you run it through a different AI checker, it came back as a complete fail. Now, the language on the back of my book, which of course, I wrote all this stuff, that one you run through the AI checker and it tells you it's 100% fine, not one AI thing in there. Now, the reason I didn't use that originally for the Amazon blurb is because you don't, in my mind, you don't want to have the same language on the back of the book also be the same language on the Amazon page. It doesn't look creative. It's the same thing over and over and over. So, but because I don't want to get tagged with being accused of having AI, I swapped out the language from the back of the book and put that in as the Amazon blurb. So that's a long, no Crimson today. There's no Ava today. There's me battling what I would call haters. But I do want to transition off that because we're going to read a chapter today from a good friend of mine named Madeleine Arnold. She goes by Madeleine Arnold, but I know her as Maddie because when she was younger, her father, Dane Burke, was a pastor at the church, and she was a teenager at the time. And I was a youth leader, actually, in that group. So I knew her when, kid's not the right word, I knew her when she was a teenager, and everybody called her Maddie. Of course, she's grown up, and she has a family and children, and as an author, it's Madeleine. So Madeleine Arnold is who we are going to be reading a chapter from today. I did do a blog post on her on December 9. So if you go to my website, davejames.com, and look up that blog post, you can actually read a little bit more about her and her book called This Box of Darkness. And I'm going to look at that blog post to sort of just refresh my memory about the book. But, I've known her for a long time. So I'm going to start more with her father, and then we're going to transition into her, and then I'm going to read her chapter. So Dane Burke is a Marine. Unfortunately, he passed away from a brain tumor, and right in the middle of the prime of his life. And it was sad, but how he handled it and what this book is about is amazing. He was a youth pastor and was a believer for many years. Tremendous faith, had a huge heart and outreach for missions to Ecuador and to Jim Elliot. There's a great book, Gates of Splendor, I think is what it's called. There's also a movie about it, I believe, where I think it was in the 60s perhaps, American missionaries went down into this part of the world where there were known to be cannibals / headhunters, and they were killed. But the wife of one of the husbands survived, and she goes back, and not the next day, but over time she goes back to that same village, and through only things that God can do, the village repented, accepted, and is now a thriving Christian community. And so it was the sacrifice of her husband and his friend, and I believe the wife. I think there were 4 of them, but I think only one survived. I could be getting the facts wrong, but I think it's called the Gates of Splendor. And if I've got that wrong, please correct me in the comments. But I believe his name was Jim Elliot. Anyways, Dane, I don't think we were connected to that particular village, but he had a heart for that part of the world and would regularly take mission groups, a lot of teenagers down there. And I remember Maddie had gone on one of those trips. I did not go on that trip. I went on a different trip, but he was tough being a Marine. I can remember he used to have these Bible studies where you would do push-ups and sit-ups and then study the Bible, like all mixed together. He was my accountability partner. What that means is you're trusting someone, you're going to share with someone a part of your life that you're struggling with, kind of like if you were in AA and you need help. You cannot bear something alone, and so you confide in somebody what you're struggling with, and you ask them to hold you accountable. And he was my accountability partner for a period of my life. And it's discussed in the book. I shared it at the funeral, and I'm not going to share it here because I want you to read the book, buy the book, and hear how he saved my marriage. It's in the book. And I shared it at the funeral. I don't think a lot of people knew what he had done and how intense he was as a person who wanted marriages to succeed. He wanted people to find their best, what God had for them. He wanted to go 100 miles an hour at all times. He used to ride his bike to work, by the way. He could have driven his car, but he wouldn't. He would ride his bike 15 miles or however far it was. He was a Marine through and through and a man of God through and through. And this book is about his daughter, Maddie, who was just heading off to college, following in her dad's footsteps. He had gone to Bible school, Bible college in Florida, and she was enrolled to go to the same place. And on the way, not on the way, but during that first year, he gets diagnosed with a brain tumor, stage 4, I think, by the time they discovered it. And this book is Maddie's journal, if you will. It's almost like a diary, but it is told first person about what that year was like. How do you transition from high school into what is supposed to be one of the most exciting years of your life? She's experiencing young love and heartbreak. The idea of a first kiss. And if you read Viscala's Wish, it's the idea of young love and I don't want to say forbidden love, but in Viscala's Wish, it's forbidden love. But Maddie, the idea of kissing is a very sacred thing. And she explains that. She wants to be pure for marriage, and kissing is a slippery slope, and broken hearts, and all those who are listening who've been through young love, she explores that and shares her heart with us. Transitioning to a school where she didn't know if she could do the schoolwork, the academic work, whether it's a very small school. I think there might have been, going from memory here, 20 or 30 people in her class. So it's cliquey. And if you don't fit in the right way, how's this going to go? Do you like your roommate? You're not supposed to date students, and yet how do you not end up falling in love with people that you spend that much time with? It is phenomenal because she explores 2 different tracks. What is supposed to be her future, but meanwhile, she has this horrible news dropped on her about her father, and she has the responsibility and the clawing about what do you do as a daughter, the oldest, to your father, and how do you support your mom? This book is amazing. We're going to read chapter 1. It's called This Box of Darkness, It is available on Amazon. It's hardback, paperback. You can buy it as a Kindle, but it's also in Kindle Unlimited. And let me get the book open here. She dedicates the book for Dad and for you. So I'm going to skip the prologue. She asked me what chapter we should read, or I should read, and I said, take your pick. And she eventually said, how about do chapter 1? So here we go. Chapter 1 of this box, this box of darkness. Come to the church. I need to talk to you about something. Just one text from Dad, 12 words, and everything inside me went cold. I was at an Iraqi restaurant, halfway through a plate of kebabs in Baba Ganoush, still glowing from the summer just lived. My first time assistant leading a mission trip to Ecuador. Telling my friend about the good, the hard, and the slightly chaotic parts of international travel. He donated to the trip and wanted to hear how it had turned out. What it felt like to lead team members instead of just being one. My appetite vanished. I held up my phone so he could see. He gave a grim laugh. Well, that's never good. It wasn't. My stomach dropped like I stepped off a cliff. We paid the bill and he offered to drive me. The 15-minute ride felt like the Baton Death March. I kept talking, but I wasn't really there. I was somewhere between dread and damage control, scanning my life for what I must have done wrong. What did they know? Had Dad somehow found out that I made out with my ex? I didn't think I'd done anything worth a full parental sit-down, but my body didn't believe me. When I got there, I yanked the church door open and my heart banging like a drum in my chest. I barreled down the hallway and then slowed and tried to look casual. When I walked into the church library, Dad was sitting at the table with Mom and Katie, my small group leader since middle school. If Katie was there, something was deeply wrong, or about to be. When I plagiarized a paper in high school, she was looped in. My chest tightened. What had I done that warranted reinforcements? They weren't angry. My mom looked held together. Kathy looked like she wanted to swallow the news from me and spit it out in a softer form, which meant there was no softer form. I looked at Dad. Military haircut, thick black rimmed glasses perched on his nose, hands folded neatly on the table. His goatee around his pressed-together lips made him look extra serious. His blue eyes were focused but still loving, like he was about to announce I'd been sentenced to death but had managed to secure exile instead. Am I in trouble? I managed to ask. Dad's face broke like he hadn't even considered that. No, he said, almost laughing, like the idea blindsided him. No, He glanced at Mom. I used the pause to glance at Kathy. She leaned slightly forward in her chair, her hands also folded in her lap. She didn't give anything away except that this was heavy. So much was communicated, and none of it was verbal. Mom and Dad were wondering where to go next. Kathy was intentionally not talking, unless of course she was telling me she loved me with her eyes. All of it happened in a moment. Mom reached across the table and rested her hand on mine. Silver rings with birthstones stacked on her smooth, tan fingers. Her voice dropped low, soft but controlled, like she was cushioning something sharp, a mother trying to regulate her child's emotions. Do you remember when Dad told you he was going in for an MRI? Yes, I did. A week ago, maybe two, I had been working, slinging lattes and bagging munchkins in my stained Duncan apron. Her text had buzzed me in my pocket. Mom, pray for Dad. He's going in for an MRI, and I don't think there's anything wrong, but he's worried. I looked at the text, paused long enough to read it, and then went back to the cash register. Dad was strong. He didn't get sick. It didn't even occur to me that this could be serious. He didn't drink or smoke. He pushed himself to be the best in everything he did. P90X workouts, biking 8 miles to work each day. He was a Marine, for crying out loud. He was 48, so maybe his body was slowing down a little. Maybe he was aging and forgetting things. He'd be fine. I finished my shift and moved on. Dad's calm, matter-of-fact voice pulled me back to the present. So the MRI came back. I have a brain tumor. Gelostable, stage 4. They say if you could pick a brain tumor, this is not the one you want. The prognosis is 6 to 12 months without treatment. Oh. That was all I could think. Oh. Like it was trivia. Like he had said the weather tomorrow might be bad. Not that he might die. This was my dad, Dane Burke. He didn't get sick. Dad wouldn't die. He couldn't. No, life would go on. Dad asked if I wanted to see the MRI. I shook my head. If I ignored it, maybe it would go away. The kids, my siblings, didn't know yet. They'd tell them tomorrow. He asked me if I had any questions, and the only thing I could ask was, can I still go over to Olivia's house tonight? He said yes, of course. I nodded like this was simply another question and another answer. I needed something to anchor me, so I chose Jane Austen, ice cream, and one last round of goodbyes before everyone scattered for college. Mom drove me over to Olivia's, my best friend since middle school. I began disassociating. I followed her inside and stepped into the kitchen like I was walking into someone else's life. Olivia and her mom, Mrs. Frawley, stood side by side, leaning against the sink. Mom and I stood at the island counter facing them, 4 of us in the same room, facing each other but worlds apart. Mom opened her mouth and I watched words leave her lips, but I couldn't hear them. Mrs. Frawley's hands flew to her mouth. Olivia shifted slightly, folding her arms, her eyes steady on my mom as if trying to absorb what was being said. How do you step into your own best friend's sorrow in a moment like this? Mrs. Frawley leaned forward, like she wanted to step toward Mom, but stopped herself. Or maybe she was bracing against the counter, holding on to something steady. I stood there like wallpaper. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't hear anything. Like a silent movie, everything unfolding in gestures and glances, without sound. I was a specter in the corner of the kitchen, observing the land of the living. Then Mom went home. Olivia and I gathered blankets and pillows on the floor, bowls of ice cream and popcorn between us. I don't want to talk about it, I might have said. Or maybe I didn't have to. Olivia would have known. We sat in silence, letting the movie fill the room, pretending everything was normal. A period of drama, with corsets and carriages, the most polished, polite, and passively aggressive insults imaginable. The kind of movie where you could pretend you belong somewhere, sometime else, as if that could make it true. Olivia was asleep. Maybe she wasn't. The lights were off and we were bathed in silence. I stared into the void. A dark portal of nothingness, a yawning opening inviting me to fall in. And even there, in the thicket of it, Jesus was present. I didn't feel peace or much of anything, but I wasn't alone. And then barely a whisper in my spirit. Wait for the Lord. Be courageous and let your heart be strong. Wait for the Lord. It wasn't a solution, but it was an anchor. In that moment, an anchor was enough to keep me from stepping into the abyss. The next morning, Mrs. Frawley and Olivia dropped me off at my home. My siblings were playing in the yard with Emmy, our Scottish terrier. Mom gathered everyone in the living room. The red suede couches were arranged in a U shape, perfect for inviting conversations and fostering a strong sense of community. But today it felt like a place for something heavier, something we didn't know how to hold. I knew it was coming. My siblings didn't. Dad sat on the ottoman, facing all of us. Molly sat in Mom's lap. She was 10 but small for her age, still the baby of the family. Eli and Hunter, 12 and 14, sat shoulder to shoulder, always on the verge of a wrestling match. Even Emma was still, her wiry black body curled into a tight coma beside the boys, ears perked like she knew something wasn't right. And then there was me, tucked into the corner of the couch against the armrest, my knees pulled into my chest, trying to take up as little space as possible. Family meetings weren't uncommon. We'd have them to plan summer trips or talk about chore rotations, but never to drop an atomic bomb like this. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a moment life split in two, before and after. A gathering of the most essential souls preparing for the harrowing journey of a lifetime. Dad looked at his younger children, who stared back at him with expectant, innocent faces. They loved him, depended on him, needed him. The words he had to deliver would break them, or maybe it would just break him. He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. Nothing. The words caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. He looked at Mom, eyes damp, and gave the smallest nod. He couldn't do it. Dad, who always had been our leader, was unraveling in front of us. He swallowed hard. He dropped his head and stretched his arm toward Mom, indicating that it was her turn. He was done. It was role reversal we had never seen before. Mom took a deep breath in and closed her eyes, wrapping her arms tighter around Molly. So we went to the doctor and found that Dad is sick. He has a tumor in his brain. It's not good. We don't know what's going to happen, but we trust God. Dad asked if we had any questions. No one had anything to say. Mom started singing first, her voice strong but trembling. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. The words lifted through the Psalms, woven into a modern worship song we'd sung 100 times since it was released and crowned Song of the Year. We all joined in. Worship was normal for us. One more way to cling to normal and to honor God and to honor the moment. The words were both prayer and plea. If we sang loud enough and strong enough, maybe something would change. The second verse spoke of praising God no matter what the day would bring. Whatever events, crises, life-shattering diagnoses unfolded, we begged Him to help us keep worshiping. The lyrics echoed off the walls, grounding us in something familiar. God hadn't been caught off guard. He knew. In the chaos, He was near, and in the morning He was with us. Everything we do, everything we experience, we give to God. That's what Mom wanted us to remember. We clung to the truth our parents had taught us our whole lives. When you're overwhelmed, cry out to God. God not only hears our prayers, but He attends to them. So we began this journey the only way we knew how, huddled together in worship, hands clasped, voices trembling, pressed into His presence as the world beneath us fractured, leaving us clinging to the only solid thing left. That ends chapter 1. Now, I have read this book, and I don't know if you could tell there, but I actually had to stop recording because it's emotional. I cannot recommend this book enough. it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not. Certainly this book is about how a Christian family dealt with the tragedy of having the father and the husband go through a brain tumor at age 48 when the oldest is going off to college and you have young children. I lived it with them. I was with Maddie and the family afterwards, and it's so happy to report that God has blessed them. They are all doing wonderful now. But Maddie does a marvelous job here sharing and revealing what has got to be tremendously painful for her, but she does. And this book, it's just from the human spirit perspective of how does a teenager process this. It's wonderful. It's a great book. I'm going to put the link into the description of the podcast, and please check it out and leave a review if you do. I think Maddie would appreciate that. Well, that is all the time we have for today, and I hope that you will join us next time, where maybe if I'm lucky, I won't have received another 1-star review, but we're definitely going to read another chapter next time. So until then, stay curious.
Thanks for listening to Trash Can Publishing Podcasts. And like all raccoons, stay curious.